Welcome back to the Realty Rundown from the Nic Wyse team, where Nick knows the market and you get wise replies to all your real estate questions.
That's right. And I'm Nathan Schwartz. Good to be back. I wasn't able to join last week's solo episode, but I'm here today to dig into some big details. Nick just got back from Washington, D.C., where he met with Congressman Rudy Yakym to talk about national housing legislation, tax reform, and the future of real estate.
Yeah, that's right. So in this episode, we're going to basically pack it with policy talk. Really thrilling stuff, but we'll try and bring it home and make it relevant to everybody. We want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the big, beautiful bill, the SALT deductions, as we call them, the state and local tax deductions, and the capital gains exclusion, a little bit of other legislation that's out there, and then kind of what's got everything abuzz, right now in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. So, Nick, first things first, what was the goal of your Hill visit?
Yeah, so this is the fifth year that I've gone out there, fourth year as a federal political coordinator. First time I went out, actually, I met with Jackie Walorski, with Chrissy Claus, who's an amazing agent as well. And she was the previous federal political coordinator assigned to Jackie Walorski. And then, unfortunately, when she passed and Rudy Yakym took over, I became Rudy's guy. So basically, my job is to go out there, meet with Congressman Yakym, and talk to him about legislation that we would like to see him sponsor, co-sponsor, or just be aware of. So when it does come up for a vote, he's aware of how that's going to affect our realtor community, but more so the Hoosier homeowners and the prospective Hoosier homeowners back home. So we're talking about things like the capital gains exclusion for primary residences and adjusting those SALT deduction caps. And then again, any other legislation that we feel like he needs to know about.
Yeah. So let's break it down for the listeners. Why is the capital gains tax tongue-tied? Why is the capital gains cap a big deal?
Yeah, it is a big deal, and it's bigger deal maybe in some areas like, Southern California. Maybe we shouldn't talk about Southern California right now with everything that's going on out there. But, areas where they've got really high home prices where, a 500 square foot house is going to cost you $1 million. But even out here, in Northern Indiana, we've got a lot of properties that are, selling for substantial values. And if they've been in a home, in a homestead for a long time, that capital gains exclusion is not going to apply. These people are going to have to pay taxes on their primary residence. And just for starters, I don't feel like that's right. Almost to any amount. Like if it's your home and you've been there for at least 2 out of the last 5 years, that's your primary residence. And, to sell that and to have the government take a chunk of that, as capital gains taxes, I don't love the thought of that. But more so, the issue is that the limits that were set in place happened in 1997. And as we talked about 2 weeks ago, home values have gone up dramatically since 1997, obviously. They've gone up dramatically since 2017, let alone 1997. And yet this capital gains tax exclusion amount of $250,000 for a single individual has not changed in all that time. So basically, if you gain more than $250,000 on your home and you're a single homeowner, you're going to have to pay capital gains taxes on any additional gain that you made on that home. So if you bought it, in 1997 for $50,000, and there were homes for $50,000 back then, and now you're selling it for $300,000, anything over that, you're going to have to pay a capital gains on. So we really would like to see that adjusted upward. We really like to see it double. Just to give you an example of how this works, I've actually got a couple that I'm working with right now. They're probably not going to come on the market for a little bit. And one of the reasons that they've been delaying for the last few years is they're going to get hit with this. Their home is probably going to sell for around $700,000. And, they paid almost nothing for it in 1974 when it was built. So it's almost all going to be gains. Now, they can exclude, because they're a married couple, they can exclude $500,000 of that. But they're going to still get hit on a capital gains of $200,000 or so. Less some of the other expenses, and talk to your accountant and figure out what you can deduct. Well, but they're going to get hit with a pretty nasty amount. I'm thinking from my analysis, a minimum of $25,000 in taxes. And that's money that they could have gone toward their true retirement, because they are retired already and they need the money. And if not, it can go to moving costs, helping grandkids with college, long-term care, all these different things that people expect to be able to use their nest egg for. The danger is that some of it's going to get sucked away and get sent off to the government for them to use on God knows what.
So what about transitioning? What about the SALT deduction?
So the SALT deduction is that state and local taxes deduction. Again, in the bigger areas in New York and California, That's a little bit more in play, where they have some higher taxes. But essentially, you're able to deduct up to $10,000 of taxes that you're paying under federal law right now. The proposal on the big beautiful bill is that you can jump that up to $40,000 that you'll be able to deduct. So, a huge difference. And again, we're maybe not pushing super, super hard for that one here in District 2 of Indiana because it's generally going to help some of the more, how do I turn this without upsetting you? I'm not going to term it at all. But, in some areas of the country, it's going to help people more than maybe it would help here. But it is something that, again, has not been adjusted for a long time. Probably should be adjusted. It can help middle income families, the few middle income families that still exist in this country. I think it would really go to help them. So that's something that we're really trying to do as well, is just at least be aware of that and look at that as an option. The problem is, how do you pay for that? When you increase this deduction, that means less money coming in, and we've still got all this money going out.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned it a couple of times, but the big beautiful bill. So it's a huge piece of legislation. What's your take on it?
I'm trying to remember what Elon called it. Wasn't it like the little terrible bill or something like that, or the big terrible bill or something like that?
Big ugly bill, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. And I think I can mention Elon here on the podcast. When I was at the White House last week, I was definitely told not to mention Elon's name at all, because that was like the day that the fighting kicked off. Hopefully that's de-escalating a little bit. I think if those two can get along, that will probably be for the betterment of the country. My personal beliefs. You don't have to like either one. I don't necessarily love either one either, but at the end of the day, we don't need that kind of fighting. It's embarrassing, if nothing else. Anyway, so as a fiscal conservative, I'm all for cutting taxes, supporting families, supporting homeowners. The big beautiful bill means basically huge sweeping tax relief without meaningful spending cuts. And so that's my issue. We want to keep those, the Trump 40 or 45, his first presidency, he made a lot of, tax cuts for people. And if those expire, it'll represent the largest tax increase on all Americans in history. So we obviously have to do something. We don't want everybody's taxes to jump up to a ridiculous amount. But the issue is here, we're talking about billions in tax cuts with this legislation, but we don't have a true roadmap to reducing the national debt. We're actually adding to it. We're adding to it in the trillions. So then we've got issues like, again, are we going to deal with inflation? Is that going to come back? This is going to put pressure on interest rates, which are still hovering, at 7% or higher. It's going to basically mean fewer resources for future growth. So while I am all for tax reform, I want lower taxes, but this has to be done responsibly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Are there any other pieces of legislation that you talked about with the congressman?
Yeah, and so these are some of the things that I get a little bit more excited about, because I think they kind of take care of themselves, instead of just cutting taxes and be like, well, how are we going to pay for stuff? Well, you cut that stuff too. It's always great when you can find legislation that can kind of do both things at the same time. So, for example, there's legislation out there called Revitalizing Downtowns and Main Street Act. And what this does basically is it provides tax credits to convert vacant commercial buildings into residential or mixed use buildings.
Okay.
So it can be partially residential. It can be partially, there's a couple coffee shop down below, maybe a little Dollar General, probably something like that down below. Hopefully not a Dollar General, more mom and pop would be great for me. But basically turning underused space into affordable housing. So here in Middlebury, where I live, we don't have a lot of that. We don't have unused commercial space so much, but certainly in Elkhart, Goshen has some. In fact, we've already seen some of this happen in Goshen. I think it's called the Hawk or the Lofts or something like that. They're kind of on the south side of downtown Goshen. They've already converted a bunch of those into apartments and condos. So we've seen how some of this can work. And basically this would give a targeted tax credit to make those spaces livable, creating affordable housing without sprawling, without like, oh, we're going to build a whole another 40-acre subdivision, subdivision over here, and everybody's going to need a septic, and that's going to fail in 20 years. So we don't necessarily want more sprawl. And it also doesn't create what we call NIMBY. NIMBY is NIMBY, stands for not in my backyard. Or I would not love it if somebody built a subdivision right behind my property. Not great. When there's a dead space out there, when there's this commercial building that's just sitting there with broken windows, if we can convert that into some beautiful residential, I feel like that's a huge win.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with all that.
What else do we? Oh, another one I wanted to make sure I mentioned was the Uplifting First Time Home Buyers Act. This one's a little bit more complex, but I'll try and get it really simplified here. Essentially, right now, IRA withdrawal. So you've got an IRA, you've been saving, let's say you've put away $10,000, and suddenly you decide, hey, I want to buy a house. The time is right for me to buy a house. Right now, you can use $10,000 from your IRA. You can pull it out, use it towards your down payment, and you will not get hit with a penalty for doing so. Okay. Well, $10,000, Nate, I mean, you work with buyers every single day. How many of them are putting down $10,000?
And I mean, not many of them.
Right. I mean, there are some programs out there, like if you're going to get an FHA loan,
right,
you're going to have $10,000 just as your down payment, let alone your closing costs, and that's on a $300,000 home. Now we're getting up a little bit higher. You want to put 20% down, obviously, is the magic number, avoiding that mortgage insurance premium. We want to see that increase somewhere closer to $50,000. Hey, this is people's money anyway. They're using it to buy a home. It's not like we're letting them take out $50,000 to go buy a boat, which would be cool too. But yeah, to buy a home, which, as we know, just absolutely stimulates the economy. I forget the exact number, but when somebody buys a home, if they stay there for 30 years, they're basically going to pump something around $1 million back into that local economy. And what they do, fixing up the home, paying property taxes on the home, all those different things contribute back. So more homeowners, and this, again, it's for first-time home buyers. The more people we can get into homes, the better we're all going to be. So
I was going to say, first-time home buyers, usually they're looking, how little can I put down? But then, we see the ones where they're already rolling equity in from their previous purchase. A lot of those guys can easily roll in, $30,000 to $50,000 from their previous purchase. But yeah, your first-time home buyers struggle to get that much money together. So
Yep. And this really rewards people that have been responsible, right? They're saving for their future. They're putting money in that IRA, and this is kind of along that same line. An IRA, giant, it's their savings account. It's one of your best savings vessels. Well, so is buying a home. In fact, I personally think it's a better savings account because, your home is going to appreciate in value. Your IRA, you may invest that in stocks, and you may make some mistakes. Home is going to go up in value, if you're going to stay there long term. So I think it's a huge win. There's definitely families that I've got in mind for this. If we can get this legislation pushed through, I think it would definitely help people who have been responsible, who aren't asking for a handout, that are saying, hey, can I just use some of my own money to buy a home and not have to pay a penalty to the government to do so?
Right.
So
anytime
you can do that, big fan right here.
Yeah, no, I would agree. There's also been some big news from NAR. What stood out to you?
Yeah. So unless you're a realtor, this is not super exciting. NAR is, again, the National Association of Realtors. So in DC, they get together as well. We have our whole board out there, our national board, and all these different, committees that meet out there. It's quite a to-do. But one of the things they were able to do is pass the NAR budget, which is awesome. That's a big budget too. I should have the numbers. I don't, but it's a lot. They collect a lot of money, and then they use a lot of money. And basically what they're doing with that is they're trying to support our legal defenses, of which we've had to do quite a bit of lately. We're trying to build tech tools to make it easier for not only agents, but for home buyers to find homes, to communicate with their agent, and then general advocacy efforts, which is exactly what I do out there. I go out there as an advocate for Hoosier homeowners, trying to talk to Congressman Rudy Yakym in particular about what can we do, how do we get more people in homes. So there's a big portion of their budget that is denoted to that. The other one that is super boring for most people, I guess it's not boring for anybody because this affects everybody, but we're basically trying to codify some ethics language. So Nate, as you know, right now, you're writing up a purchase agreement and I'm presenting that purchase agreement, or I'm listing a home. There's a section on there that details fair housing, how we treat people that are in maybe underrepresented classes. And so right now, realtors have to adhere to that because we have agreed to do that for quite a while. But now we're trying to basically codify and add sexual orientation and gender identity to fair housing protections. And we're trying to codify that in the federal law. So even if you're not a realtor and you're just a real estate agent, or perhaps even an auctioneer, you are still going to be required then to treat everybody fairly. At the end of the day, you and I can sit here, Nate, and be like, well, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't anybody be treated fairly? That's the world we live in, right? And so this just gives some more protection for those protected classes, that if they feel they've been discriminated against, they have an additional avenue now to go down and say, hey, we were misrepresented. We weren't treated fairly. We want some help.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the big takeaway or the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
Yeah. The big, beautiful bill is what it is. We'll see what happens. It's in the Senate right now. They'll hopefully chop up some of it because it is almost a little too big and a little too beautiful, if you will. But there are some things I'd like to see them take out of there. Some things that are not really directly related to taxing and spending so much. There's some weird language in there. I think we might have talked about it 2 weeks ago, but there's some stuff in there about AI and how the federal government can use AI basically in any way they want. And state and local governments can't do anything about it for the period of the next 10 years. So say what you want about, whoever's representing us right now in Congress and in the White House. I don't love that. I think that just rewards the really big tech companies. I'm sure they're excited. I would imagine they were probably instrumental in getting that put into the big, beautiful bill. But there's things in there that I hope the Senate can look at. And I think we've got some great senators who are already looking at it. Let's chop some of that up. Let's maybe take a closer look at that SALT deduction. Again, that state and local taxes. Do we really need that to be bumped up fourfold? It's already $10,000. Do we need that to be exempt $40,000?
Right.
Because that probably, it does help middle income homeowners and middle income persons in this country, but it definitely helps some of our higher income people more than the lower income people.
Right.
And that's not the direction I feel like we need to be headed. We need to be lifting everybody up. And I'm a big fan of lifting up from the bottom, right?
Yeah.
So huge fan of that. So basically I had a great time in DC. I got a tour of the West Wing of the White House. It was totally awesome. I got to take a little jaunt because I had about a day and a half in between where I didn't have meetings. And so I literally left my Hill visit with Congressman Yakym, rented a car, drove to Harper's Ferry, which is super cool old town. Nate, you got to go sometime.
That's awesome.
Take Joanna out there. You would love it. It's very chill, very laid back. It's at the confluence of two rivers, the Shenandoah and the Potomac, which goes all the way down to DC. Just gorgeous, man. So I spent a day there, and then part of the next day, drove up real quick to the Gettysburg battlefield, did a very nerdy tour of that, which was awesome as well. I love all that stuff. And really got rerouted, and just reminds me every time I do that of why I'm there and why I go out. And just, friends, if you're listening and if you're interested, I'm going to continue to do this until they tell me to stop. I'll keep going to DC. I'll keep advocating for you guys because I truly believe homeownership is the foundation of the American dream. Mm-hmm. It is the number one thing that we can all do. And I want to make sure it's protected.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I guess that's it for today. That's it for this episode of the Realty Rundown. Again, big thanks to Congressman Rudy Yakym and his team. They're just amazing. They're always so receptive. I love the way they listen. It's such active listening. The questions bounce back and forth, and it was just a really wonderful meeting between myself and several other constituents here from District 2. And again, just thank you to Congressman Yakym and his team. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, and don't forget, you can subscribe, leave a review, or shoot us your real estate questions. And remember, Nick knows and Wise replies.
Yep. And hey, Nate knows too.
That's right.
Nate knows too. Right. We're going to have to incorporate that more. Nick and Nate know. We know.
That's right. We do. We really do.
That's right, guys.
Listen to us.
That's right. We got your back. All right, guys. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.